Welcome to Writers Not Writing, a show where I interview authors about the ways they procrastinate and highlight artists who are using their voices to push back against fascism. I'm Benjamin Gorman, your friendly author in exile, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug does his best to try to make me sound better. Welcome to Writers Not Writing. Welcome to the ad-free bonus version of the show, just for supporters of the Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. Yes, you are the best.
If I take my time.
Welcome to Writers Not Writing, everybody. So I'm taking a little break from my edits to record this week's show with Doug the producer. Thank you for being here, Doug. And it's just us this week. And I am working on multiple projects simultaneously. And this is something that I've learned about over time. I used to really focus on, in the same way that I tend to read one novel at a time. I don't read multiple books at the same time. I would work on writing one novel at a time. Not to the exclusion of reading books. But when I was working on a novel, that was the novel that I was working on. And during COVID, I was very ambitious. I think a lot of people went through this, where at the beginning of COVID, we thought, I'm going to be so productive in my lockdown time. And like many people, I found, no, that was not the case, or at least not in the way that I thought. The novel that I started during the lockdowns remains unfinished, and I will never return to it. But during that time, I found that I could work on other pieces of prose and poetry. At the time, I was working on a poetry collection, and that switching back and forth between projects was actually really productive for me. And so now I am trying to make a habit of having different things that I'm working on simultaneously, so that if I get stuck, I can go, okay, today this novel's not working, but this novel is working. So I'm working on two novels and still writing poetry, and my edits just came in for third novel, the novel which is part 3 of my trilogy, and that one will be ready to go and will come out in October. But I am also feeling overwhelmed. I think I may have pushed this work on multiple things at the same time to its limit. I am also publishing other people's books. That is very time intensive. And don't worry, authors, your writing, your work is prioritized in the list. So I am not putting you off until I finish the next 3 books or whatever. But I've also been working a lot with an organization that we affectionately call PPAB, Publishing Professionals Against Book Bans, and you're going to hear a lot more about them in the future as we kind of go live and go public. But I'm on the leadership team for Publishing Professionals Against Book Bans. That's really important, very rewarding work, but it's a lot. And then the world is on fire. You may have heard. Things are not great in my home country, and hence the leaving. And so even though I'm here in Spain, I am very concerned and worrying a lot about what is going on in the United States and what the United States is doing abroad. It's been a scary time in that way. And here in Spain, times are tight. I didn't come here because, I would be living in the lap of luxury. We came here because we were escaping. And so now I'm to the point where I'm going, okay, I've got to find work and cobble together some probably teaching jobs. So it's a lot going on at the same time. Very stressful time. And I joke kind of gallows humor about, it would be really convenient if what was going on in the United States could take a break for my sake. Now, I understand. That is a very grim joke, because I understand a lot of people are really suffering. But I think it's worth acknowledging globally. This is stressing everybody out. And folks in the United States, I can only imagine what it is like day to day for you. If you are as fixated on politics and terminally online as I am, I'm sure it's stressing you out like crazy. But even if you're somebody who has tried to, I'll be talking with folks and they'll say, "Oh, I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention to the news because it stresses me out." This is inescapable at this point, and so I'll bet even those folks are really struggling. So I hear you, and I understand, and I am trying to navigate myself, continuing to get writing done, continuing to be productive in that way, and also recognize that you can't just disappear from all of this. You can't just hide from this. And so I've got my Antifa hat on. Tomorrow we will be right out there with you. Those of you who are engaged in No Kings protests, and we're all going to find out. I think it was Sart who said something to the effect of, you don't fight fascism because you believe you're going to win. You fight fascism because it's fascism. And, victory over this regime in the United States is not guaranteed. And so I hope that a huge swell of popular, expressions of displeasure will translate into helping, some politicians grow a spine and realize that's, the way the wind is blowing and stand up with a lot more strength. Please remember, the Democratic Party will not save you. You have to save the Democratic Party. And so convincing them to stand up forcefully, politicians and political parties want to stay employed. And so they are going to do what they think is in their short-term interest rather than, what is in the long-term interest of the country. And that is a function of being a political party. That's not to say, these are bad people. But you have to tell them that the incentive structure is for them to stand up, that they will get reelected, that they will be supported. And I don't want to say it may be too late, but if they get to the place where they're saying, yeah, you'll reelect me, but I'll get arrested in the meantime, that is going to be part of their calculus as well. So embolden leaders who really are followers. They're representatives. That's okay. They represent you. Tell them how to represent you right now. Make them be the leaders that they're often mistaken for. They're followers, and that's not bad. They're representatives. Tell them how to represent you, and we'll see if that is something that can be effective anymore. So I am very nervous about that, and it feels weird to say, and I'm also working on all these books. I think probably a lot of folks are feeling like the things that we do with our time seem smaller because of what's going on around us. And maybe that's to the good. I fully acknowledge I should have been a lot more aware of what was going on, for example, in Gaza. And I went, the American situation is so bad. If we can just get a sane person into the White House, then we'll tackle that issue. I postponed my concern for my fellow human beings until after an election. And that is something that I'm going to have to live with. And I think a lot of us are going to kind of wake up to the immediacy of issues that we wish had been able to be easily postponed, but it makes all of the day-to-day work that we're doing seem smaller. And at the same time, I want to say, living your life is important right now. If you are continuing to write or continuing to create in any way, that is, it's not just mental health. The work needs to go on. But maybe it's not bad that we're realizing kind of where it falls in the greater scheme of things. I don't think that kind of reflection is ever unhealthy either. So, acknowledging that, while it's difficult, continue doing the work. Now, I will say this: if you are an author who is watching this, or if you are a reader who is watching this, since readers, you are my primary focus, my primary audience. What you are doing by reading people's books or writing those books for folks is anti-fascist activity. And I talked about this in a video that I made this last week on diversity of tactics. Diversity of tactics, I'll try and be brief and not repeat too much of that, but diversity of tactics, I know you first hear it and you go, I think I know what that means. The first time I heard it, I was like, using more than one tactic, having diverse tactics, easy, right? Its history is actually more complicated and a lot more meaningful. It comes from a time when there was a big debate within the civil rights movement about whether or not to use the family of tactics that goes with nonviolent resistance or tactics that include violence. And really, nonviolent tactics also depend on violence, but they're about making the other side be violent towards you and not being violent in return. But you absolutely agitate. You make people uncomfortable. You cause problems in that way. But there was this debate within the civil rights movement. And the concept of diversity of tactics was about unity within a movement. It was about saying, some people are going to do things you don't like, but you're all working toward the same ultimate goal. And so diversity of tactics is recognizing, rather than dismissing people and saying they're fighting in a way that's not the way I want to fight, is saying, we're fighting towards the same end, even though they might not be doing it in the way that I am comfortable doing it, and that's okay. And that's hard. And there are of course limits to that. If somebody said, well, respect diversity of tactics, I'm going to kill 1 million people. Like, no, sorry, there is a point at which your acceptance of violence crosses a line that is, antithetical to the objective. However, and Howard Zinn said this much better than I could, but something to the effect of, not recognizing that the other side has already chosen violence. And so being really thoughtful about some measure of what he called trouble is, acceptable, or at least philosophically, ethically defensible in the fight for justice. So that's what diversity of tactics means. And in the little talk I did about diversity of tactics, one of the points that I tried to make, and I want to keep saying this, I'm repeating myself, but I think it's worth reflecting on. Art is anti-fascist activity, or at least can be. Yes, there are certainly people who create art that maintains the status quo, right? And then there are people who say, my art isn't political. I see these folks in my threads all the time who are saying, I just got another bit of feedback from another reader who says, I really like your books, but I don't like that you are speaking about politics online. And luckily, the authors that I'm following are saying, too bad. But there is no way to be apolitical as an artist. No matter what, we live in community. And we are either saying the way my community is currently operating is fine with me, or the way my community is currently operating ought to change. There's no in between. It either stays the same or it changes, right? And so if you attempt to be apolitical, you are making a full-throated advocacy for the status quo. Or you can say the way society is set up, the way things are working is unacceptable to me. Right? And I want it to change in this way or that way. And maybe that's, the speed limit should be 5 miles lower in front of that school zone or whatever. It can be very small, right? You can be politically active in your community. And yet that is important. Or it can be, this entire, global capitalist order is deeply unethical and should be changed. Or, I don't know, making it so that we have, temperatures that human beings can endure on our planet is a worthwhile goal, and we need to change if that is our objective. So art is going to be saying, pay attention to this, let's change this, or let's keep everything the same. And in that vein, art is anti-fascist, because fascism, although it is not ideologically coherent as a conservative movement, it tends to come out of conservatism, although the impulse towards authoritarianism can come from the right or the left. Can take advantage of rightward and leftward impulses. So, at their heart, the right says things should stay the same, or at least if there's going to be change, slow down, right? And that's not terrible. That doesn't make somebody, saying let's slow down and think this through is good. We need some of those folks, right? And then progressivism is, no, we need to change things. Let's go. Let's make things happen. And that comes far more naturally to me, but I understand the value of real conservatives, right? Who say, I don't know have you thought about these unintended consequences? Those kinds of conservatives are really valuable. But from within a conservative movement, you can get authoritarians who say, I can cash in on this. This impulse to not change, I'll say, let's just go backwards to when things were, even more authoritarian in their social structure, if you just give me all the power. And this can also happen on the left, where you'll get folks who will say, oh, you want progress? The only person who can give it to you is me. And the important thing to understand about authoritarianism, whether it is in the form of fascism or left-wing authoritarianism, which isn't really lefty, but kind of the Stalinist version, is both those ultimately are not about the ideology. They're not about keeping things the same. Nobody looks at what's happening in the United States right now and really in their heart of hearts says, Trump hasn't made any changes. Things have changed dramatically in 4 months, right? But he tapped into conservative impulses and kind of populist sentiment and racism and sexism and homophobia, right? And then used those, but really the only ideology is power, right? Whatever would have worked. Somebody like Trump would have said power, power, power. And Stalin, same thing. Like, he didn't really care about creating a utopia of perfect equality. He just wanted power for himself and used the communist structure of very fragile structure of Leninist Russia and converted it into authoritarianism without ideology, right? And so if you are creating art and you are saying, hey, people in power, whether that's far right or far left or wherever you are, but right now it's the far right, let's be honest. Your attempts to gain power are illegitimate. I'm going to tell a story about people being brave and standing up and doing what's right when it is scary. All those values that we see over and over and over in the fundamental kind of hero's journey, creating art is an anti-fascist activity. And I think I feel like I need to say that 100 times. If you are engaged in art, you're Antifa. You are engaged in anti-fascist action. And if we believe in diversity of tactics, if we believe in saying, your fight might not be my fight, but I recognize the way you fight might not be the way that I want to fight, but I recognize that we're working towards the same end, and so I will support you, and I expect you to support me, and we together are going to fight back. When it comes to art, that means then saying, okay, I'm going to support artists. I'm going to support my fellow artists, whether that is as a consumer of their art, or as a popularizer of their art, and tell people about their work. But if you're the artist yourself, supporting other artists and building a community of that kind of mutual aid, right? Where, okay, how can I help you to get your do your work, whether that is spreading the word. I always think of spreading the word because I have to think about marketing a lot of the time, but that's not it for a lot of authors. A lot of times it's just support in the most, fundamental sense of, reaching out to an artist and saying, I know what you're doing is hard and I want you to know that it's valuable. And mental health support. And artists need that right now. And so if you are an artist, I want to tell you personally that the work you are doing counts. It is anti-fascist action. It is valuable. It is difficult. I feel you. I recognize that doing this work right now is hard. But also you're a vital part of the fight, and I see what you're doing. And thank you for doing it. Thank you. That's diversity of tactics is a lot of it is recognizing who's standing with us, and I recognize that artists who are doing the work right now, even if you're writing something that seems only tangentially related to what's happening in the world right now, if you're writing, you are defying in a way right now, and pretty much regardless of what you write. I'm sure this administration would prefer you just didn't, right? Don't express yourself at all. And so if you are expressing yourself, you're fighting back, and bless you for it. Thank you for your work. Speaking of which, I always ask folks about how they're procrastinating, and now that I've rambled about all the various kinds of work I'm doing, I know that can create the false impression that I am working 100% of the time, but I'm not. I do find ways to find entertainment, and I want to mention one book series I have been reading. So in an upcoming show, I'm going to have Chelsea Kane on as a guest. I'm very excited. Those of you who know, I'm sure a lot of you know about Chelsea Kane, New York Times bestseller. She's a big deal. And she's going to be on the show. And she's also a friend of mine. I know her through, Crystal introduced me. We've met. She came to my birthday party, or came to one of my launch parties. She's a very, very, just a wonderful person. And so because I'm going to be interviewing her, and I want this to be clear for all future guests, I do not normally try and read your entire oeuvre. I just can't. Somebody's going to be on the show one week. I can't read every single book you've ever written. But I try and, read something so that I'm informed. But because Chelsea's a friend, I'm trying to become a completist and read every single book of hers. And so I am, 4 books into her Archie series. I've read all of her comic books, and I've read, I've read a lot of her other stuff. But now I'm, getting to her novels, and oh my gosh, I am enjoying them so much. And it's a weird thing to be reading right now because she writes about serial killers, and I don't want to say procedurals. They're crime thrillers. They're kind of true crime but fiction, right? And so very deeply researched, and she's from Portland, and so all the settings are very much in Oregon, and the story is set in Portland itself mostly, and so it's kind of a love letter to the state, and so that makes me feel a little bit at home, even though I'm reading about psychopath serial killers, but it has been weird to be either listening to an audiobook, wandering around this city, and listening to that, or escaping into a physical text when I know my phone is right there and has the latest kind of horrific news. And it is also valid, right? It is good to read books right now, and escape some. So my thanks to Chelsea Kane for what she wrote. I'm sure it's funny. I'll bet she never thought this is going to feel like escapist fiction compared to the horrors of the world, because it's, literally, she's writing like graphic torture scenes. It's some scary, disturbing stuff. And yet it's fiction. And because the world is awful, although I also want to reflect, the world has been awful. The world is awful in a way that's touching my life more and making me more aware of it. And I bet a lot of you are in that same boat. But because of that, because at least of the place I am at emotionally and recognizing what's going on around me, reading about this psychopath and the cop trying to catch her has been a relief. So I encourage everybody. All of Chelsea Cain's work is great, but that has been my procrastination lately. I'm thoroughly enjoying it and very much looking forward to having her on the show in September. So keep an eye out for that. That's going to be a fun one. Let's go to commercial break. When we come back, instead of my normal question about daydreams, I think I'm going to talk about time periods. Welcome back, everybody. So I saw this quote that I love from a scene in The Lord of the Rings, in which Frodo is talking with Gandalf and says, "I wish it need not have happened in my time," said Frodo. "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us." J.R.R. Tolkien. So I've been thinking about this concept of the time we've been given. And depending on your age, I'll be interested to hear, and please leave in the comments the way you think about eras in your life, the time that you get to be alive. Because in some ways I am so deeply lucky, and I'm not just talking about the fact that we have enough food, right? That I've been able to live, and some of that is geography and colonialism, right? I was lucky enough, roll of the dice, to be born in a wealthy country. But modern medicine. I mean, I get to live in a time with antibiotics. That's pretty nice. I'm a big fan of antibiotics because, I've had strep throat before. My ancestors would have just died. So it is, I can be grateful for this time. But also as an author, I don't work well. I don't handwrite as fast as I think. Maybe that would have been different had typing not been an option. But also, I got into publishing at a time, the timing is very specific in my life in terms of, I was very lucky to get into publishing at a time when the gatekeeping was falling apart. The business was changing radically. Indie publishing was coming about. We were just coming out of the time when people would, kind of look askance and go, "Oh, that's vanity publishing," right? And print-on-demand technology made that possible and financially viable. I don't have to buy 8,000 copies of an author's book to sign them. We can hope that they'll sell 8,000 copies, but we don't have to have them sitting in a warehouse. So, I can type. I have a computer. I can communicate with people around the world, and those folks can order books, and those books can then be printed after they've ordered them. So in many ways, it's a wonderful time to be a writer, and so I want to be recognizing that and be grateful for that, and at the same time, I understand why folks are posting this quote. Right? We live in these times, and they're posting that for a reason. And I look back at the kind of decades of my awareness. I was born in the late 70s, but I don't remember it. But the 80s, from the perspective of a cishet white guy growing up in Illinois and San Diego, California, was this halcyon childhood, right? And I didn't know enough to know that things weren't great for everybody, but I think it was easy to see in the 80s as the kind of Cold War was ending, and then into the 90s as the Cold War ended, and we were under this illusion that there was going to be no more war, right? It was easy to fall into the trap of believing in perpetual progress, right? Even when you could recognize something was unjust, you could deceive yourself into saying, but it's still better than, and therefore this progress will continue, forever, and things are just going to get better and better. And we now live in a time where I hope that myth has been dashed. And I hope that people are recognizing that part of what laid the groundwork for the rise of the right worldwide, really, was not just the factors that encourage people to side with the right, but the complacency of the rest of us who said, oh, things are just going to keep getting better. Everything's fine, right? And, you know, I'm torn about this. Part of me says, I get to be alive in a time when I get to stand up. And who knows? There's no counterfactual, right? Maybe if the kind of experience that at least I had in the 80s and 90s had continued forever, that would have been detrimental to me as both an ethical human and as an artist, right? I focus on, you know, what am I speaking about and to whom and to what end as I'm writing every single bit of prose, right? Who is this book going to help? And who is this book going to challenge? And so maybe I'm really lucky to be alive in a difficult time. That's a weird thought, you know, but maybe Gandalf is wrong. You know, maybe all who live to see such times don't wish that that bad things hadn't happened, because the bad things that we're aware of maybe are better than the bad things we were unaware of and allowed. You know what I mean? Like where we said, everything's great. Well, everything was not great for, you know, most of the people in the world. But when things are going well for you personally, it's easy to say, okay, we're on a path, and everybody else is going to be okay, and you know we're headed in the right direction. And I think realizing, oh no, this is a danger to me, can open up our eyes to the fact that it's always been a danger to a lot of other people, and we can become the kind of people who look out for one another. And really, I would rather live my life as the kind of person who is devoting his attention to helping other people than the kind of person who's saying, everything's fine, what am I going to write about today? Right? That's not, you know, that's not the kind of life I want. So maybe it is not so bad to be recognizing that we're in a very difficult time, and we do have to decide what to do with the time that is given to us. And also, it may make us better people than we would have been otherwise. I don't know if that is a comfort to anyone out there, to realize that acknowledging this and recognizing it and, you know, going out to your first protest changes you, right? And so tomorrow is the No Kings protests around the world. Here in Spain, ours is No Dictators, because we have a king. And I am not questioning that because I'm a guest in this country. But I think there are going to be people for whom tomorrow is their first protest. And I'm actually excited for those folks. Yes, it's terrible that it took this much to get us off the couch, right? It's terrible that it took you this long. Not you. Like, I recognize we all come to this work too late. I was talking about that on last week's show. No matter when you realize you need to stand up to fascism, it's too late. Not that it's too late to fight fascism. You will wish you did it sooner. Because the more you learn as you get engaged, the more you'll go, wait, why wasn't I engaged previously? There were 10,000 other things that I should have been upset about. And, you know, some of that's just growing up, right? But some of it is recognizing when you get engaged in the work, you start to learn from the people around you who knew things you don't know. And you're learning. And once you get involved with, you know, standing up to authority, you start to learn, oh, there have been a lot of abuses I was not aware of. So I wonder if there will be people tomorrow who, despite the fact that it has taken some atrocities to make them this angry, it may in the long run be a real pivotal moment in their lives where they can say, yeah, I'm going to be telling my grandkids about the fact that I stood up. It does not justify anyone's bad behavior, to cause the necessity for that. But I think I hope you take some inspiration from it. Getting involved in whatever way you can. And there are lots of ways, and they are valid. But getting involved and not just being informed. Informed is just one step, but being involved. Choosing the thing you're going to do. Making those phone calls and, supporting your local food bank and, an artist you like. Those are all anti-fascist actions, and they will make you a better person. This is an opportunity as well in that way, although it is grim, and I don't want to Pollyanna it and say everything's great because people are protesting. No, it's sad, and also it makes me hopeful for them that when we get through this will be a turning point in their lives. I say them, not but I can remember my father took me to my first protest, was an anti-war protest when I was young, I think maybe 13, Gulf War One, and protesting is deeply ingrained part of me as a consequence, because once you are engaged in saying, once you're looking around going, why is everybody else holding up these signs and saying no to the people in power? Oh, I need to learn about why, right? And I'm very lucky that happened to me so young. And I made sure as a father that I, took my son to protests young, ones where I knew he would be okay, but at the same time I wanted him to be engaged, right? Because it changes you. And so I hope you have a transformative experience as you become engaged. Again, doesn't justify the reason you had to get engaged, but it is good for you. Okay, so before we get to our send-off, thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to the author Stephen E. Scribner, author of the Taunt Fantasy series, who makes music under the name S. Eric Scribner for his song A Poem from his album Pianosphere. We used that during the ad break. If you make music and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's or Steven's song, so email me about that. Thanks to Doug the producer for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. And I cannot forget to mention Writers Not Writing is a production of NotAPipePublishing. So please go to NotAPipePublishing.com. Check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. Also, in the show notes, there is a coupon code, and so you can get a discount on the books there on NotAPipePublishing.com store. And there's some really cool merch we've been adding, more T-shirts and other designs. So use that coupon code. Check it out, because you made it this far in the show. You should get a reward for that. And as I was saying before, please, encourage authors. If you're a reader watching this show, rate and review their books. It takes very, very limited amount of time, and it really goes a long way and means a lot to artists out there. For the last few weeks, I've shared the same send-off as I let you out into your week for our outro. But I feel like I've already made that point today about the fact that all writing is political. So instead, I want to reiterate something that has been said by lots of my guests, and that is, please take good care of yourself right now. And taking good care of yourself will take different forms, and those are legitimate. For me, I'm realizing I'm not drinking enough water. Hydrate, folks. It's important. But take care of your soul right now. In the midst of all of this, and know, I hope you know and feel that the way you exist in the world is valuable and is appreciated. Even if it's some funny looking bald guy on the other side of the world is grateful for you, right? And sometimes it's hard to feel that right now. So I'm glad you exist. Keep existing, and do what you need to do to take care of yourself so you can keep existing. Thanks, everybody. Here's our bonus segment, just for supporters of the Patreon. For our bonus segment, I often ask our authors about what's some question that they wish they were asked, and I was racking my brains and I can't think of it. So I'm just gonna fill all of you in, Patreon folks, about something that is a little detail that you would not know otherwise from the show, but when you're looking at the background here and you're looking at the show, I've got the nice mic. I've got the camera, although it's a little further away from me than I would like. I've got the new setup, two monitors. So if you were looking at this from, over my shoulder, although I do want to get something nicer than this map behind me, but if you were looking at this place from over the shoulder, you'd go, this looks like a professional-ish rig, right? This is, and of course, Doug, the producer, does an excellent job. Those of you who are new to the show might want to learn more about Doug from some of our first episodes, because Doug is a fascinating individual. But Doug, as our editor, is doing all this video editing and stuff to make the show possible. Here's what you cannot see through that screen. And even if you were standing behind me, you would not see or hear. It does not affect the video quality. It is ridiculously hot in this room. So I've got a fan, got a window. Most of the time I can be cooling myself off, but when I'm recording the show, you have to turn the fan off, or otherwise you get the fan noise. And so you may notice that shows start to get shorter and shorter now that I am in this room in Spain in the summer, because oh my gosh, it is so hot. The other day I was at a meeting of it wasn't a PPAP meeting, I don't believe. I think it was a meeting. Oh no, it might have been, because the leaders for the Publishing Professionals Against Book Bans are all over the United States, and so they were having a conversation about the weather, as one does before the Zoom officially starts, right? And so, what's it like in New York today? What's it like in Chicago? I mean, there's New York, Chicago. There's somebody in Missouri. There's somebody in Arizona. There's a couple folks on the West Coast, and so they were talking about the weather, and they got to me and they said, "How warm is it there?" And I was like, "Oh, it's only 24." So. The conversion doesn't help it feel any less hotter in here, and Frankie and I have been laughing about that. Our kid Frankie, every once in a while they'll say, like, tomorrow's going to be 70, and I'll say Celsius or Fahrenheit, and Frankie then reminds me, if it were 77 Celsius, we would all be dead. So we're learning the conversions slowly but surely, having to look them up less and less and having, more and more points of reference. So I remember that day when it was 24. Boy, it was sure hot that day. Okay, that's what 24 feels like. But yeah, it's going to be warm here this summer, and I don't handle heat particularly well. I know the shirt makes it look like, why did he wear that hot? This is actually a really cooling shirt. I got this in I believe it was in Vietnam. No, it was in Cambodia last year. And this is what folks wear when they're out, in the rice paddies. And so I trust them. They know what they're doing. And this is a cooler shirt than my cotton t-shirts that are thicker, that are heavier. And so yeah, I'm wearing my cooling off clothes. But it is still roasting in here. So that's a little peek behind the curtain. The room from which you see this podcast, you can just safely assume it's sweltering, and I'm doing my best. And if it feels like I'm rushing my guests at the end, it's because I'm really, really hot. So there's an insight you didn't ask for and probably didn't care about, and now you know. It's taking up space in your head. You're welcome. Take care, everybody. Have a good week.